Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Tanya and You Chapter 34. Wow. We are now concluding another section of the Tanya, which began in chapter 26, 26 through 34. We conclude this idea of joy, simcha, how important it is, and the inner struggle that happens in the Beinoni, trying to attain real joy and simcha in their life. Um, it's a amazing chapter again, like every chapter in the Tanya, and it really talks about how to concretize, to carry through, to pin down, to bring into actuality an inspiration, a raw inspiration, which we spoke about in last week's chapter, but to really make it real and make it consistent. That kind of wraps up this idea in the last few chapters, as we say in chapter 34. In chapter 26, we began this idea, the importance, the necessity of joy in life in our service to God. And we spoke about various impediments to joy, inner turmoils that come in our way, thoughts that come in our way, whether it's physical hardships that drag us down, or whether it's our spiritual journey isn't the way it's going, isn't going the way we'd like it to, may drag us down, and how to kind of overcome these struggles. And then we spoke about the importance of sometimes understanding that we have this void, that we have this, we are incomplete. We're not really living up to where we are meant to be. And we spoke about that a little bit, the importance of that. And then we said in chapter 31, but wait, hold it. This shouldn't bring you to depression, because we have two souls within us. And it's our animal soul, which maybe isn't perfect, and we have to strive to perfect and to refine and to grow. But our godly soul always remains connected to God, and that also brings a certain type of joy. And then we went on to chapter 33 to talk about that. When we understand, when we contemplate on the ideas, how God is so close to us, there is this unity between God and his world. The world isn't something separate, an independent existence outside of God's reality. On the contrary, it's all one with God. God is right here with me. God is close to me. Thinking about that, it will bring joy. And here is where chapter 34 kind of continues where we left off, where yes, we may have this inspiration. Wow, I understand how God is so close with me, and I am kind of like a light, like a ray of the sun within the sun, right? I'm part of this greater idea of mission of life, of godliness. It's not about me, it's about the idea, it's about what I could accomplish. But am I always inspired? Am I always feeling that? Is this consistent? How is this going to inspire me? And how do I feel the joy of being close to God when I am not inspired, right? When I'm inspired, it's great. But how do I inspire myself when I'm not inspired? How does this emunah, this faith in God, that God is near me, really carry me through the entire day? So just first, a little, I want to preface with something I heard this week. I heard someone else, I heard someone talking, and it really grabbed my attention. This idea of emunah, of faith. When we believe in God, we believe that God is close to us. God is here and now. It's so real in our lives. So I heard this story that someone once came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, right? Someone came to the Rebbe. And we know that the Rebbe was a genius in Torah. I mean, behind me we have some of his books. I mean, he was second to none in his knowledge in Torah, and not just Torah, in secular studies as well. He was knowledgeable in every area. I mean, literally, like scientists and people from the army and people, doctors and musicians. In any field, he was knowledgeable. He was a genius. He was a very smart person. And someone once came to the Rebbe and says, "You're so smart." I'm paraphrasing. "You're so smart. You're so intelligent. How is it that you have so much faith in God? You have faith in God like a little child. Your faith is like a little simple child, like the simplistic faith in God. Yet you are so intelligent in every other area in life. How do these two things coexist in one person?" That was the question they asked the Rebbe. And the Rebbe responded that faith in God is a different skill set. It's a different skill set. In other words, if I could paraphrase, is a musician smart? Is an artist smart? I mean, it has nothing to do. They're good, they have a skill in music. Does that mean that they also have a high IQ in understanding a deep philosophical idea? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. It's a different skill set. It has nothing to do. Emunah, faith in God, is a certain skill set where if you're trying to reach that through intellect, through wisdom, you may never get there. It's a different skill set. You have to approach it like a little child. A child has this simplistic faith in God. Now you have to develop it, as we said last week, right? You have to develop. We shouldn't be like the thief who is praying to God before they break into someone's house, because their faith is undeveloped. But when we are developing it through our intellect, ultimately we're feeding into something which goes beyond our intellect. There was a great scientist. We'll start with a little l'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvarim. Chaim. A great scientist. His name was Dr. Velvel Green, who was in Minnesota. You may have heard me talk about him before because he's a fascinating person, fascinating life story. Passed away a number of years ago. He towards the end of his life, he made an aliyah to Israel. He lived in Beersheba in the south. He was from Minnesota, and also very, very intelligent person. Loved a great thinker. And he got involved with, he started embracing his Judaism later on in life. He got involved with a Chabad rabbi of Minnesota, Rabbi Moshe Feller, who brought him to the Rebbe, and he started having correspondences. He started writing letters to the Rebbe. And he also had opportunity to meet with him face to face. So I believe that this was one of his face-to-face meetings with the Rebbe towards the beginning of his journey into Judaism. He asked the Rebbe, "What are some proofs? Prove to me that there's a God. Prove to me. Let's have a philosophical, theological discussion." There are many books written to prove that there is a God. It could be proven. The Rebbe didn't go there. The Rebbe says, you have a pad of paper, you have a pen, take a pen and paper, hold it with you in your pocket. Every day, when you see signs of God in your life, write it down. Just jot it down. Don't think through it. Just make a little mark, a little half a sentence of what happened, just as a notation to remember. Do this every day. And then eventually, you'll look back at it. You'll see that there's a God. You got to be Abraham. Abraham was someone who was extremely intelligent, and he was able to discover God just through his wisdom. He looked around the world and he realized that there must be a creator. But what he inherited to his children and descendants is this simplistic faith, this inherent faith that we have, which goes well beyond our intellect. Could you reach it through intellect? Absolutely. Because truth penetrates in all areas of life. If it wasn't if it wasn't true, then I wouldn't be able to get there in every area in life. But because it's true, then it has to be true intellectually as well. But it's sometimes difficult to reach it only through that channel. You have to understand that's a different skill set. So that's a little something about our faith and how Abraham had this faith on a whole nother level. And we also can attain this faith when we try to use our intellect to develop this innate, this essential, this core faith that we have within us. But ultimately, it's above that. And as we said in chapter 33, when we think about this faith that we have in God, that God is so clear and so near and close to us, it brings joy. But chapter 34 deals with a very important problem. As I mentioned previously, the problem is consistency. I want to feel God every moment of my life, every moment of my day. I want to be inspired 24/7. But I know myself. I know myself. I may be inspired every morning. I may be inspired once in a while. But there are times where I feel distant. I feel uninspired. And that's human nature. Human nature, right? We can't be on all the time. So how do I feel close to God? And which brings joy, which I want all the time, all the time. So the good news is as follows. The Tanya tells us, calm down. We have good news for you. The good news is that going back in history, put on your history hats. You're an historian today. Going back to history, to the very first time that the Jewish people, as a people, were extremely inspired with God. What was that? Mount Sinai. The Jewish people are standing at the foot of the mountain. And what are they hearing and seeing? Godliness itself. The human physical ear was able to experience the most lofty spiritual experience. God himself revealed himself. How did that look? How did that sound? I don't know. It was above like what a human should be able to experience. And in fact, the Midrash tells us that their soul expired. It was too much for them to handle. Their physical, mortal, limited bodies weren't able to handle such great, intense revelation. It's almost like when you take a thin glass cup and you pour really hot water into it. What's going to happen? It's going to crack. It's going to shatter. It's not meant to handle such heat. The human body wasn't built to handle such spiritual revelation. It couldn't handle it. It was such great, the word is bittul, self-nullification. They were standing at a point where it probably felt really good because they were completely immersed in something greater than themselves. They weren't thinking about themselves. They weren't thinking about how am I feeling right now during the revelation at Sinai. They weren't thinking about self. They were so involved in the experience that they were just there for their experience. Right? They say, what happened if there were phones during Mount Sinai? No one would be experiencing Mount Sinai. Everyone would be on their phone, trying to record it. Right? Thank God we didn't have phones. So we were able to be present. But being present means that they were able, that they basically weren't living in themselves. They were living in godliness. At that moment, they felt just like the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Moses, which we refer to them as the chariot of God. Why are they the chariot of God? Just like a chariot has no will of their own. They're fully controlled by the rider. So too, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Moses. They didn't have a will of their own. They were fully controlled and nullified and kind of giving themselves over, subjugated themselves completely to God, to God's will. I'm here, whatever you need me to do. It's not about me, it's about what I'm needed for. And this is what the Jewish people had for a few moments at Mount Sinai. And it was great. They loved it. It was a great experience. But it was too much for them. And God knew right from the start, it's not going to last. It's not going to last. This intense inspiration is good for once in a while. It's a one-time experience. It's not going to last every moment of their life. And God was already telling, knew the future, that we may also have moments of inspiration. Maybe not that intense, but inspiration, where we take the time to contemplate on our relationship with God, and we feel, wow, I'm so altruistic today. Today I'm just going to do what's right, even if it's hard. Talk to me an hour later. How do I feel then? Right? What happens after I stub my toe? Who am I cursing? Right? Suddenly everything goes wrong. Right? What happened to the inspiration? Well, God knew this right from the start. What did God tell the Jewish people right after Mount Sinai? God says, build for me a home. Build for me a mishkan. I want a physical space to house a spiritual revelation, which was something new. It seemed to be an oxymoron, right? If it's a spiritual revelation, it is not limited by space. Yet God says, I want a physical space, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, as we call it, the temple in Jerusalem eventually, to be a physical space where we will have the revelation of godliness. According to the Zohar, even though it is not so clear in the chronological order of the way the Torah is written, that this commandment, this instruction to the Jewish people to build the tabernacle actually occurred before they sinned 40 days later with the golden calf. It wasn't only a response to their sinning of the golden calf. Initially, this was the plan, that in order to concretize, to bring down this intense inspiration of Sinai into something real and something consistent and something tangible, how do they do that? Through building an abode, building a home, a physical space for something spiritual. Diane may remember this. When we were in Jerusalem, right, in our trip, I think this was the first time we went in 2018. So as we were walking we were in Jerusalem. We're walking to the Temple Mount, to the Kosel, to the Western Wall, and we went numerous times to the Western Wall, as we know. But one of the times we actually stopped in a little synagogue on the way, and we had a little discussion. And the question that we were asking then, people were asking, says, "What is so holy and unique about the place of the temple?" Right? We all know that God is everywhere, right? Where is God? We have this little song we sing to our kids. Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere, right? God is everywhere. God is in our homes, God is in the workplace, God is outside, God is in New Orleans, God is in Israel, God is around the world, wherever we go, God is everywhere, right? It's like the ray of the sun. Where is the ray of the sun? Everywhere. It's in the palace, and it's also in the dumpster. It's everywhere, right? We shine forth everywhere. God is everywhere, in the most holiest place, in the most mundane place. So what does it mean that God is in the temple? So we spoke about this idea basically from this chapter of the Tanya, actually, that there is the idea that God is everywhere. God fills the world. But then there is the revelation of the Shekhinah, which that is uniquely found in certain spaces, like a synagogue, a holier space. It's a place where there's more of a revelation of godliness. Godliness is felt more. You could be everywhere, but you're felt more in certain places. Just like a person could be, I could be in the office, I could be at home. when you go to a person's home, you feel their presence more than when they are in the office. Godliness was felt and was actually seen in temple times. There were actually miracles that were occurring every single day. The mission tells us there were 10 miracles happening all the time where you saw there's godliness over here. Now, miracles happen all the time everywhere, but we don't always see them the way we see them in the space of the temple. So God was saying, I want a place where I am revealed, felt in this physical world. So take this inspiration that you have at Sinai. Don't leave it as a raw inspiration. It's not going to last. You have to bring it down into something more tangible. Build for yourself a tabernacle. Now, the language used for build for yourself a tabernacle and I will dwell within it, it doesn't say I will dwell within it, but I will dwell amongst them. And the Midrash tells us that really the message it was a double message. The message was first of all, yes, build an actual tabernacle where God could be felt. In addition to that, each and every one of us have to build a symbolic temple within us. We have to create a space within us that we are housing God in a revealed way. So we are a walking tabernacle, a walking temple. And what does that mean? So the Tanya says two examples, two ideas of what we could do very practically to bring down this inspiration into something real, where we're actually going to feel close to God, even when we're not on fire from this inspiration. And what is that? He says, first of all, it's the idea of studying Torah. When we study Torah, and specifically the halacha, Jewish law of Torah, that's a place where God says, now you are becoming my host. You are hosting me when you study my wisdom, my Torah, and specifically my laws, because God is felt more. God's will is really felt most when we study what He wants us to do. Right? There's Jewish philosophy, but then there's Jewish law. Jewish law means, what does God want from me? How should I live my life? That's very much taking the essence of God, God's will, and saying, this is how you should live. Make this very real and tangible and concrete in your life. You're actually changing your actions. You're doing or not doing something based on God's will, right? I could study Jewish history. It's an amazing study. We should all study. We should all study all areas of Torah. But when I'm studying Jewish law, what that's telling me is I'm going to change the way I act. Something physical is going to change in my life because I know this Jewish law. That is really bringing God in a real way into my life. And the second thing that Tanya says in chapter 34 is doing a mitzvah, and more particularly the mitzvah of charity, of tzedakah. There are 613 commandments, but from all the commandments, God says tzedakah, charity, is the one mitzvah that really brings out this idea that we are feeling close to God. Why is that? Of course, tzedakah is thinking about another person, which is very important. Tzedakah has also something else. Every time we do a mitzvah, we are elevating that item that the mitzvah was done with, right? So if I take a piece of parchment, which is just a piece of hide of an animal, and I write a mezuzah on it and I hang it on my door, I've elevated the parchment. I've elevated the plastic or the metal case or the wooden case. I've elevated the doorway because now it's part of a mitzvah, and I've elevated my house perhaps because now the house is a house that has a mezuzah, right? So now it's all a house that's doing a mitzvah. So we brought holiness, kedusha, into the home. When I give tzedakah, and no matter the amount, I take a dollar bill, and I give it to someone in need. I put it into the charity box. I give a donation. I give tzedakah with this $1. What am I elevating? So yes, you can say the physical piece of paper, or the piece of metal, the coin, or the credit card, or whatever, right? Whatever is being used to actually give the funds to help another person, that is being elevated. But it's more than that. Because how did I receive this fund, this dollar bill? I worked for it. I worked for it. So I put in a lot of time and energy to bring home a paycheck. And what could I have done with this paycheck? 1.5 million things. I could have bought more food for myself. I could have went on a nicer vacation. I could have had more money in my account. That makes me feel good. I could have done so many things, legitimate, totally kosher things with this money. But yet I decided I'm not going to keep this money for myself. I'm going to give it to another person. So when I do this mitzvah, what am I elevating? It's not just the physical money or that act. I'm elevating all that went into that, into attaining that money. So it's all my being, basically, which I spent time working hard, toiling with my hands and with my whole, everything that went into it. That is all being elevated with giving tzedakah. So that's why the one mitzvah that really brings out this idea the most, that I could take godliness, a godly inspiration, a godly idea, a spiritual God, and bring it into my life and elevate the most physical elements of my life. Where is that most? In the mitzvah of tzedakah. So that's what God says. When we give tzedakah, we become a host to God. And this is really a perspective change, a paradigm shift in how we view a mitzvah, in any mitzvah, especially tzedakah. They say this analogy where you ask someone, said, "Look, you see this box? It weighs about 200 pounds. Do you mind carrying it for me? Carrying it for me? I mean, I could carry it for maybe I could really lift it. Even if I can lift it, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to carry it. Do me a favor, carry it. Let's see how far you could carry it." So I'm a nice guy. Let's try to lift it. But how many? I could carry it for 5 steps, 10 steps, 20 steps. But eventually, my back is hurting me. It's too much for me. I can't do this. And then the person will tell me, by the way, you know what's in this box? It's not stones. It's actually diamonds. And if you carry it, you'll be able to keep it. Suddenly, not only am I willing to break my back for it, it's not as heavy. Suddenly, it's only 200 pounds. I could do this, right? I can handle this. When we change in perspective, when we understand a mitzvah, this is an opportunity where godliness becomes real in my life. Suddenly, it's not heavy. Suddenly, we do it, it becomes light. And we have that excitement, that simcha, that joy that we're looking for. So this is really what chapter 34 is telling us in continuation to 33, where we have this more philosophical understanding of godliness and how godliness is so close to me in my life, which inspires us and brings joy. But if we're not able to be inspired all day long, bring it down to something real, like studying Torah, doing mitzvah, any mitzvah, especially tzedakah, and that is that's like building a mishkan for God, where we have God close to us all day, every day. And with this, the Tanya kind of wraps up the discussion that we had really from the beginning of the Tanya, but especially from chapter 12, where we start talking about the Beinoni, where the Beinoni is the in-betweener, right? The person who on the one hand is striving to be perfect in thought, speech, and action, but at the same time has the inner struggle, where we still have the animal soul, which is trying to entice him and trying to pull the person down. And there's an inner struggle. And the Beinoni is trying to control himself, at least in thought, speech, and action, right? And then we spoke about the importance of being joyous, that if the Beinoni wants to be successful in this struggle, in this battle, you have to be happy. You have to be joyous. But what happens if I'm not happy? For various reasons, right? So Tanya talks about that. What are the mental exercises that we have to go through to keep that equilibrium and keep that happiness? And then we spoke about, well, sometimes we're just apathetic to God, and even though I'm trying to do what's right, I couldn't care for it. I'm not inspired. I'm not excited about it. And we say, you know what? Maybe you got to give yourself some spankings, right? You got to sometimes put yourself in place and say, wait, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. Why am I so proud of myself? I'm distant. Then the question was, well, if so, you may be depressed. Then we say, no. We have to understand. We have two parts to ourselves. Which element of us is distant? Our animal soul. Our godly soul is always close. So thinking about our godly soul will bring joy. Thinking about our animal soul is where the struggle is. You can't ignore the animal soul because you also want to bring it along in our journey, right? You want to make sure that you feel that I could grow and I can't just give in all the time, right? I have to understand that I'm not where I'm supposed to be and have to grow. On the other hand, to focus on my godly soul and be joyous and be happy and be close to God. So this is an inner struggle that's going on to the Beinoni. And this is what chapter 34 concludes with, and kind of wraps up this idea from so this whole section of Tanya, that this is the life of the Beinoni. That on the one hand, there is a joy on one side of the heart, and then there is this like pain and feeling of distance in the other side of the heart. But it's not a contradiction because we have two parts to our heart. We have these two souls in our heart. And one of them feels excited for who we are and excited to be close to God and excited to do a mitzvah because this is who our true self is. But we still have another self. We haven't totally transformed it like the tzaddik has. We're a Beinoni, or we're striving to be a Beinoni, or we have moments of being a Beinoni where we still have the other element in our soul, in our heart, the other soul in our heart, and we have to deal with it. And that is the inner struggle of the Beinoni. And are we ever going to graduate from this inner struggle? Perhaps not. But like we said previously in the previous chapter, God appreciates the struggle and appreciates every time we're able to overcome that struggle. So this kind of wraps up the chapter 34 in this section of the Tanya. And then next week, I should say next class, we should be able to continue with chapter 35, which takes this whole idea of bringing godliness into more of a real physical, concrete way, brings it up to a whole new level of understanding how this is really the mission and purpose of all of creation, to create a dwelling place here down in this world. So I'll leave you with